So I'll just launch into it, I guess. Now I'm now joined by Felipe Schreiberg, who is, how shall I describe it, a polymath of whiskey. A talented musician, one half of the Rhythm and Booze Project, a whiskey correspondent for Forbes, a judge on the panel of the World Whiskey Awards, and he has a master's thesis in sustainable whiskey distillation. I feel we're only going to be scratching the surface today, but Felipe, thank you very much for joining us.
No, thanks very much for having me. You're very generous with your introduction.
I'm not
Yeah,
saying anything
it's a
that
pleasure.
isn't true. Whiskey really seems to be a very big part of your life.
I guess so. It's more than anything, I drank a lot of it, and then I figured I'd try and make all that drinking seem useful somehow, and so it just kind of rolled on from there more than anything else.
Only more of us could do the same. But how did whiskey first enter into your life?
Here and there, it was university. I went to university and did my undergrad in Scotland, so that'll kind of provide a good backdrop for that kind of situation. And I drunk whiskey a couple times here and there, and always liked the taste of it. And then in my last year during my undergrad, I really discovered, really got into whiskey in a big way, and it's because I discovered there was a student society where you'd pay £6 or £7 and you'd get all these incredible whiskeys. And this was in St. Andrews. I was part of the American invasion in St. Andrews, doing international relations, as a lot of the American students were doing. And so you go in and do this tasting, and they'd always put out maybe 50 spots with 6 whiskeys each. And if only 25 people bought tickets, you still had the 50 spots with 6 whiskeys each. So at the end of the night, you can just kind of go to the community and be like, can I drink some? And they go like, yeah, it's fine. So you end up paying very little money for a lot of amazing whiskey. And so that's how it started, really, through fairly irresponsible binge drinking of very nice liquid. And then from there, with buddies, there's an amazing whiskey shop in St. Andrews called Luvian's. And they would have these amazing bottles on discount. So at the time, you could get in like an Old Pulteney 12 for 20 quid. So then I'd go halvesies on it with a buddy. And so, 10 quid for a half bottle of amazing single malt. Great. And so we kind of get our way through these whiskeys. And just from there, it built up. And so, but that's how I got into it. That's the rambling answer to your very simple question.
It's inevitable in Scotland, right? You're surrounded by it, and eventually you surround yourself with it. Yeah. Now, were you a musician before you got into your whiskey, or did whiskey actually help serve as inspiration for getting into music?
No, I kept the two quite separate for quite a while. I did classical guitar for a very long time, about 10 years. Then I did jazz guitar for a year, and I couldn't stand it. Couldn't quite get my head around all the theory. I was an impatient teenager, having to look at numbers and figure out math and scales, and that all seemed lame. And so then through that, one of the things I did actually get my head around at the time was blues music and basic blues theory, which is on paper much simpler. So I liked that. And then when I went to university, I got more into it. I started jamming with people and playing, and started a band that's still going today up in Scotland. That's been going for 10 years now. So the two were kept very separate for quite a while. And it wasn't until really maybe about 7 years ago or so that there were little opportunities that came about that started to combine the two. But yeah, that's how I started with music, through classical guitar. So now I play very little guitar these days. Most of what I do is on a lap steel guitar, which is a similar kind of instrument, but a pretty different technique to playing it. So,
I've seen it. Yeah, it almost looks like one of those sort of classical Chinese harps that you play it horizontally rather than on the side. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, this is a little bit simpler than something like that. In this case, it's just essentially a plank of wood with a pickup on it, and you put some strings over it, and you're ready to go. And so that's what I'm using these days, really.
Sound like shameless flattery, but you do get an incredible sound out of it. So.
Oh, thank you very much. No, it's good fun. It's good fun.
But you say that you were keeping sort of the whiskey and the music apart for quite a while, but now they've crossed over. And is there any one song or one lyric in any song where like it's talking about whiskey and the music, and they just somehow combine together, and you're like, yeah, that's the gospel truth?
The not quite. I would say more that just because there is that stereotype of blues and whiskey, and you've got kind of a whole bunch of classic songs around blues and whiskey. And you've got a lot of great songs about it as well. That there's plenty of moments when you can do a song like that, especially when you're combining sort of the live music with whiskey element. That's fun. But really, more than anything, I think so much around drinking whiskey is about just being in a situation where you feel good. And if the music that we're playing just serves as a great backdrop to that, or you can do cool things with music to enhance that whiskey drinking experience, whether the song is about whiskey or not,
yep.
Then that's what really matters. We did a fringe show last year where we combined whiskey tasting with blues music, and we did a little segment that we called the ultimate blues and smoky whiskey experience. Not very creatively titled. But what we did was we had people in the audience sip a Lagavulin, they had to close their eyes, sip the Lagavulin, hold it in their mouth, and they weren't allowed to swallow it until we started playing kind of this hard, punchy song. And so the idea is when the song starts, you swallow it, and then you all of a sudden get this smoke blast, and therefore you have this kind of cool experience where both your palate and your sort of nosing system and your ears are getting this kind of all-in experience. And so to be able to do those kinds of things is a lot of fun.
For sure. And that makes waiting for the drop a completely transcendent experience. My God.
Yeah, that's the idea. You want to help people transcend, I guess, that's the real goal more than anything. And so if there's any songs that help that process, those are the ones that you want to really go with, as opposed to a song that's always perfect no matter the situation. Yeah.
Nice. Now, it seems that maybe Lagavulin featured for a reason, because you've had an interaction with Lagavulin before when you went to Isla, got one of the casks from the distillery and turned it into a bass drum. Is there something particular about Lagavulin that just really recommends it as something that makes music?
Yeah, it's in this sort of situation, it's less that the Lagavulin, we used a barrel in this situation. So we took an entire barrel and stretched a skin over both sides of it and created this big old bass drum. It's less that Lagavulin has a particular tone to it, and more that what made it special for us was Lagavulin was our first choice of distillery, and it's just because of the emotional connection that we've got with the distillery. So with the Rhythm and Blues project, it's myself and a drummer, Paul. So he's the one playing the drum, not me. And Lagavulin is important to us because we just go a long ways back with them and had a lot of special experiences with them over the years. So that when we came up with the idea to do this, they were the first people we got in touch with to make it happen. And so for us, and especially sort of that combination of music and whiskey, it started when Paul and I had the idea to go to Isla, just the two of us, and to play in the local bars and hotels in exchange for, no, we didn't want cash. We just wanted a bed, food, whiskey. Probably in the backwards order: whiskey, a bed, food. And so we got to play in all these crazy places on the island. And one of the gigs we did, there's this lady, and she's bubbly and pretty tipsy. And she comes over to us. She's like, boys, this is great. This is great. I'm the distillery manager of Lagavulin, and you're coming into my office tomorrow, and I'm going to destroy you. We're kind of like, okay, if you say so. And so we rock up the next day. So this is Georgie Crawford. She's now at Port Ellen, but she locks the door to her office, breaks out, about half a Glencairn of new make spirit. She makes us drink that before moving on to other liquid. And while we're drinking with her, she's telling us, you have to come play at the Isla Whiskey Festival. And we're like, there's a festival? And then from that tasting, every year we've played on Isla and done the facial. And that's all thanks to that experience we had at Lagavulin. And since then, we know the Lagavulin team. Georgie's a good pal. And so we've had so many experiences with them that when we had the chance to do the drum, we had to go with Lagavulin. And that's how it all came about. So it's just because of our history with the distillery. And when they were up for it, and that we managed to get through sort of the Diageo bureaucracy, that was cool.
That's really an achievement in itself. That shouldn't make the edit. Speaking of, I'm just going to quickly check just to make sure that this second guy is really filming. But
Yeah,
I'm
sure,
pretty
sure.
sure it is. It is. Cool. Nice. So I did actually, yeah. I'll give you a moment. Okay. I did want to touch on the kind of singing for your supper tour you did of Isla. A lot of folks will look at that as a very inspirational thing to do. People want to get out there and maybe hitchhike and maybe do a kind of no money tour somewhere. Do you have any advice or any cautionary tales from that experience you'd give to anyone looking to do the same?
I mean, in that specific situation, I guess it was more like, everybody was great. So we didn't have any trouble. We were a bit idiotic because we're carrying like instruments, amplifiers, suitcases, either on public transportation or hitchhiking. And so people very generously would see these kind of two schmoes on the side of the road with just a whole bunch of stuff and be willing to pick up all of it. We were lucky that everybody was all right with that, pretty much. And so in that sort of situation, I mean, yeah, no, if it feels right and it feels like a good idea, then, just go for it and take a chance. Isle is certainly a great place to do it. But Scotland in general, it's such an incredible place. So it's I mean, go for it, really. An adventure is always fun, so go for it.
Nice. Small jump now, but another of your dream jobs, because you've got a stack of them, judging for the World Whisky Awards. I'm not even going to ask how you swing a gig like that, but what is it that you look for in an award-winning dram? Is it what the rest of us will be looking for, or is there another level to it?
I guess, I mean, one of the interesting, when I was doing the judging, they give you kind of a set of criteria that you have to go with. And you're always tasting blind, so you don't actually know what you're drinking. So in that kind of situation, and you'll know the category. So they'll tell you, this is the, Scottish blend under 12 years old, or, single malt whiskey, single malt Scotch whiskey or something. So you'll know the category, but you won't know what it is. And it wasn't so hard to kind of get through the whiz. So I did 2 rounds. So I did the initial round at home where they sent a big collection of samples that I just made my way through and scored them and sent the scores back out. And then I was in the judging panel for the second round, where you're trying these whiskeys and, you have to, grade them. But in this case, what was interesting, especially in the second round of judging, is that you have to, essentially they let you rank the whiskeys. You do kind of this ranking system, and you have to do it in order of preference. And so the thing that I found tricky was, do I rank it because I like it, or do I rank it because I appreciate the certain things going on here that are worth considering? So, essentially my profile, what I like best is stuff that's big, bold, and smacks me in the face and calls me dirty names. That's essentially what I like. I can appreciate a light, easy, and complex whiskey, absolutely, but really the big stuff, big flavors, that's my bag. So there was a situation where, there were situations where I'm trying something, it's like, this is awesome, but it's a little bit unidimensional compared to something that I might not like as much, but I can appreciate. There's actually clearly sort of greater technical complexity going on here. So I tended, to the best of my ability, as unbiased as I could, to favor more things that were, rather than stuff that just emotionally got me, stuff that more was like, this is something that anybody could appreciate, as opposed to something that I appreciate. But, there was no policing on this. It's not like the judge, the people running it can come up to me and be like, how are you judging this? So that was, I think, the question that everybody on the panel had to kind of confront for themselves and make decisions on based on that. But what was an interesting moment, though, is that when there was a round in the judging where we're picking the whiskeys, and whichever one of these whiskeys that was picked was going to become the world's best single malt. And everybody knew that's what these whiskeys were. So you've got kind of the top ones that have kind of cleared through and got the best scores. And what was interesting there is that everybody, for the most part, it was down to 2 whiskeys. And it was kind of like one was, and that was almost like everybody's kind of picking between the 2. There was like 5 or 6 of them, but it was between the 2 that people were really picking. There was a couple other outliers that came in, but
I
And for
think
the most part,
we'll
people
increase
pick
the
the one.
dramatic tension at this point for the viewers. We'll need names for those two whiskeys.
I don't know what the second one was, actually. The winner was the
Oh.
Hakushu 25. So the Hakushu 25 got best single malt, and that's the one that I picked. And I know I picked it. And most of the other people did. And then there was a chunk of people that picked the other one, and that was the one that everybody, for those who picked the Hakushu, you know, the other one was like, that one's also awesome.
Yeah.
And I actually still don't know what it was.
But way of doing it.
Yeah, so that's the sort of situation you're facing. Sorry. But yeah, that's the sort of situation you're facing when you're doing the judging. And but it was also my first experience judging. So I'm a total rookie at this. There's a lot of people with a lot more experience than me that will probably be able to have better insights than I would on the process. But that was kind of the impression that I got as a rookie, as a happy rookie, and a grateful rookie, shall we say.
Yeah. But it's also true that expertise, sometimes you can get a bit set in your opinions, whereas if you're new to something, you could bring an insight that maybe an expert couldn't. So it's great to mix it up.
I mean, they were happy to have me, and I was happy to be there. So I'll take it, you know?
Sure. So I guess I'll lead into my last question now, because you also organize tastings. You do big multi-sensory whiskey and musical experiences when things are normal. Now you've moved your tastings online. How much of a different approach is that?
It's interesting. So fortunately, when we had to cancel all our events, which is horrible, but you know, I mean, this is the situation we're in now. It was just kind of like, it just it makes sense to do something like this. So managed to find a supplier. So I'm working with a company called the Dram Team. They're based out of Bristol, and they're excellent. And they're essentially were perfectly equipped to do this with me. And they were up for it. But the challenge is almost like, all right, I'm going to run a tasting. The people will get their whiskeys. So then it's translating, you know, the personal experience to a bunch of people in their own spaces staring at a small screen. So the challenge, and we've just started running these. I've done about 4 of them so far. And the challenge is really, how do you make that engaging, and how do you make that as personalized as possible, given that you've got a bunch of mostly strangers. Sometimes there's groups of people that'll dial in, but mostly strangers on their own staring at a little screen. And how do you turn that into something that's actually interesting, educational, and engaging? And that was my concern going into it. But you know, if everybody's just willing to enjoy, what really makes it okay is it's good whiskey. If you're serving good whiskey, everybody gets to appreciate it together. So in a way, the job is actually not necessarily that hard. It's just a matter of, you know, ensuring that people are able to feel like they're having a cool, subjective, their own special subjective experience with the liquid, and feeling like in the tasting that's able to really come through, even if all you're doing is staring at a tiny screen. If you're able to feel like, you know, everybody's enjoying the whiskey in their own way and feeling comfortable with what's going on, then it's going to be just fine. And so far that's been the case. So so that's great. And it's great to be able to do that.
Well, I think we've probably already self-selected for an audience who enjoy whiskey and have tuned in to a tiny screen to watch us talk. So I think we'll include a little link in the downstairs so that if people do want to join the tasting, they'll know where to go. Absolutely. And
it's for those that have been patient enough to listen to me ramble until now, thank you so much. It's really appreciate it.